Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And how's it going, everybody? Thank you so much for joining. Indeed, that was right before coronavirus. It's crazy because it's been 8 or 9 months, and it feels like just yesterday we were at a bar just getting a beer and some chicken fingers or something in New York City. So thank you all for joining. As Alex said, my name is Roman Zelchenko. I'm the CEO and founder of Laborless. It's an immigration tech platform. I am a former immigration attorney myself, and sort of decided throughout my work that there was some of my job that I thought ought to be automated. And so I kind of went on a circuitous journey building a tech platform that takes some of the compliance processes that I had to deal with and automates them. I'm really excited to have this panel today because everyone here, Ben, Lynn, Ian, Romesh, and myself, were all sort of figuring out something within the global mobility and immigration space from a technological standpoint that has been either totally ignored or just, we think, somewhat outdated. And so we're really excited to chat about that. I wanted everyone to do a quick introduction of themselves. So Ben, would you be willing to say a few words?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Heller. I'm the CEO of PricePoint. PricePoint simplifies and automates move pricing for movers and mobility companies. My background, I'm a supply chain professional. And in my previous role at Accenture, I ran their global mobility consulting practice. So I had 50 different corporate clients outsourcing mobility procurement to me. And I ran a lot of RFPs. And I found through that process that move pricing was broken. I couldn't adequately control that my clients were going to receive a quality move at a fair price. And I looked at all the options. I looked at the relocation management companies, didn't see anything innovative there. I looked at the household good audit industry and saw that externalized a tremendous amount of cost to the movers and put negative downward pressure on the movers that ultimately made them really use the worst origin and destination agents that decreased the quality of the experience for the transferees, which was the exact opposite of what my clients wanted. And I finally met Ryan Kynes, and Ryan was an international move pricing expert, and he had built a software called Mover to Mover, which was designed for booking movers, the movers that you work with, to connect with their origin agents, destination agents, and freight providers, and automate that pricing. And I felt that if we connected the buyer to their booking movers and their booking movers to their supply chain, some amazing things could happen, and that it would drive a better transferee experience. It would increase the speed, make things lower cost for everyone, and really revolutionize the way we buy moving. So thanks, Roman. I'm really excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. Ian?
Thanks, Roman. My name is Ian Hawes. I'm the co-founder and managing partner of EB Translate. So my story and how I got here is pretty interesting, actually. My best friend and I started this company after he and his wife went through the immigration process. He and his wife went through the K-1 fiancé visa process. It's a little bit different than the mobility stuff that everyone's used to. But at the end of the process, he sort of came to me and said, you know, what can we do to make things easier on everyone? What are the pain points that we experience? And the number one thing was actually translations. So that's when we founded EB Translate as a language services provider with a focus just on immigration-related certified translations. So we started that in 2014, and we've grown tremendously over the last couple of years as a result of how we implement technology to streamline the process, how we work with our clients, whether they're law firms or mobility experts and executives or whoever, and how we kind of make that process easier for them. So that's EB Translate, and thanks everyone for having us on here.
Awesome. That's really exciting. Lynn, would you please share a few words?
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having me. I am the founder and CEO of Pivot, which is the mobile app designed specifically to reduce churn and improve the well-being of relocated and mobile employees. So Pivot was actually started out of my own experience. I relocated to London with my employer at the time, which was Bloomberg. And I faced the issue that I think all people do when moving to a new and unfamiliar place, which is how do you go about making your new city feel like home? And there were two things that I really needed. The first was information on my city from people I trusted. Where do you live? Which bank do you join? Where do you take your mom for dinner when she comes to visit? things I didn't want to rely on a Google or a TripAdvisor for. And then the second piece was, how do you recreate your network from scratch? Because as anyone that moves knows, it's friends you need the most when you're adjusting to a new and unfamiliar place. So what we ended up finding is corporations on average spend about $90,000 relocating a single employee. And because there's no social component helping these people acclimate, about a third of those people quit their job within a year or move back home because of social reasons. So we're really excited to tackle this problem.
Awesome. So interesting and so different. I love it. Romesh, last but not least, can you share just a couple words about you and what you do?
Sure. Thank you, Roman, and great to be here with all of you. My name is Romesh Badani. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Bridge. Bridge is an immigration platform that combines modern purpose-built technology with high-touch legal expertise to improve the immigration process for companies and their international employees. I come from an immigrant family, but I did not go through the immigration process. I'm not an immigration attorney. I come from a financial services background and then later a technology background. And when we started to look at this market, we heard the same thing over and over and over again from companies and foreign national employees. The same three problems. One, that the process was very messy, disorganized, inefficient, that really immigration had not yet caught on to the broader HR tech wave. The second was that the process was anxiety-inducing and frustrating for international talent. And then the third was that immigration felt very transactional, very ad hoc, and not like a cohesive sort of programmatic process across the company, that there was a lack of consistency from one process to the other. So we set out and realized that it was really a combination of technology and great legal expertise that could transform this function for companies. We now work with close to 500 corporate customers. We've worked with foreign nationals from about 170 different countries, and it's been a fun ride.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you all so much for the intro. So we want to jump in. I know this panel is about 45 minutes long. We have about 35 minutes remaining. I do want to say to folks who are out there listening, please drop comment, share your comments. Please ask us questions. There will be a Q&A towards the end, but I think more importantly than anything, we want to have this be interactive and give you the information that you need rather than just lecture you and then give you only 10 minutes to answer questions. So as things come up, please pop them up. So one of the things, the first thing really that I wanted to mention was, and kind of to jump onto this from the beginning, is I think this idea that we've all touched on through our intros, that technology has sort of replaced or is replacing either outdated or introducing non-existent processes and services and solutions. I think all of us, regardless of whether we deal with, like Lynn, you deal directly with transferees, or myself and maybe Ramesh, where we're dealing on the immigration side, and we deal with the organizations that hire and move transferees. The transferees always have been the most important stakeholder, right? They're the employees of our companies. They're the lifeblood of the organizations. Yet a lot of, and I think people have been saying this for a long time, a lot of the service providers or maybe some existing technologies haven't put them front and center in terms of how software has been built. And so I think what's really interesting and what I'd love to hear from all of the panelists today is what was that sort of point for you where you said, okay, we need to really build technology that's going to focus more on the transferee, because we always say that, but the services and the tech that we use doesn't really translate. Just from my perspective, my labor list, my startup automates H-1B visa compliance. So the LCA and public access file process. So anybody here who hires H-1B workers, there's this part of the process that is really important when it comes to compliance. And a lot of times, the sort of technology that's being used is either non-existent or so outdated that it creates a ton of friction that shouldn't be there. I'm curious for you all, where are you sitting from the perspective of what pain points your technology is actually solving and how it benefits the transferee at the end of the day, as well as the organization?
I'm happy to start, Roman.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I think in the immigration world where we live, specifically B2B immigration, you've seen a shift over the past few years where sort of your modern forward-thinking HR teams are hyper-focused on that employee experience. That has become, at the top of the totem pole for priorities. And that's especially true these days, right? During COVID, there was a dramatic shift towards, okay, how do we make sure our employees feel comfortable, confident, healthy, et cetera, and not distracted? And so for immigration, this has always been a no-brainer in the sense of you're talking about your superstar engineers, data scientists, the folks that you're willing to sponsor and go through what has been a challenging immigration process, particularly in today's political climate. You're doing this because you really value someone. And so as we talked to companies, that was the first thing that they talked about. It wasn't sort of what we heard maybe 5 or 6 years ago, where it was all about improving the HR professionals' experience and making the process easier and more efficient. That was certainly important. But the first thing they asked is how does your solution improve the experience for our international talent? And so we would go deep there and really start to understand and actually interview the international employees. It was all about visibility. It was all about communication. It was the feeling of being able to self-serve, right? And not have to wait for an answer, not have to wait 48 hours to hear back from my immigration attorney. I want to go in and see and feel like I have control over the process, feel like this is truly a collaborative process and that I'm not on the outside looking in. So I think technology for all of us plays a valuable role in providing that type of visibility and confidence in the process.
So I kind of want to direct this conversation a little bit because I want to ask Ian how you feel about this sitting in the IMI Translate side, because I think the immigration process often has some form of documentation translation that needed. And I think after that, I want to hear Ben's perspective of like, okay, we've gotten the visa, right? Everything is great. Let's move the person. Ben, in that case, in that instance, what are you thinking? And then it's like, great, person finally landed, visa's great, all their stuff's, they're sitting in their new apartment. So I think, Lynn, is where you come in and it's like, well, now what? How do you actually make this place feel like a place you want to stay in? So Ian, if you could sort of start us off there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, Romesh hit the nail on the head with the trend that we've seen over the last couple of years is that it's different now, right? So for us and in our perspective, the number one thing that I heard from mobility HR folks is that they want more insight into the process. So they previously may have just relied on, like a law firm to handle the translation side of some of their documents, but now we're seeing them, they want more insight into the process and they want to expose their employees to self-serve process that makes it much easier for them. So that's one thing that we focused on is how we can just make it easier, how we can streamline it. Nobody wants to be told, here's a list of translators, go out, see what their prices are, you're offering. Nobody wants that. It's a terrible experience. And that's what we've sort of talked with our clients about how we can improve that for them and what we've done over the last couple of years. So that's sort of our perspective. And certainly we have a lot of people now that are really interested in much more of the process than just, hey, what software are we going to use? What, HR platform are we going to be on? They want to see from the very beginning to the very end. They don't want to just let things go, which is actually, it's great that we have this panel because I think we sort of each fit into a different step and phase of the process. But yeah, so, I mean, Romesh was spot on. That's a trend that we've seen too, and we will continue to see over the next couple of years is more insight, more quality control over the entire process.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I went to 22 mobility conferences last year, and even this year, you're hearing a lot of people still talking about transferee experience, and also they want all their data in one place. And this conference in particular, I'm hearing a tremendous amount about data, which can drive better decision making and experiences. But if you look at the moving world, it's completely disjointed from all of that. The buying experience for moving is terrible. The transferee historically might have 3 people come to their house to do a survey. Then it takes a week or so to collect that pricing. Then they give the bids back. Then there's a move that's selected. You've taken 2 weeks of time just to pick who you're going to choose to move with, let alone the actual process of getting someone to your house, packing all that stuff up, moving it, and it's an invasive, challenging process. And I don't think that the moving industry historically has really changed all that much until about a couple years ago, when it became very clear that this needed to happen. And so I think where we see that we can add a lot of value is in really trying to streamline and compartmentalize and take out portions of the move process that aren't really necessary to delivering a good experience to the transferee or that data to the mobility manager. And so that, from our perspective, a lot of the problems with moving relate to pricing, because it is extremely burdensome for the moving environment to actually manage all those components. Moving internationally, it isn't like one party is involved. It's often 4 or 5 people or different companies, and that makes all of it very complicated. And that trickles down into a really poor experience with transferees, a lack of accountability. And by digitizing all of this and connecting everyone and enabling that to be integrated into all these other platforms and HRIS systems, well, now you can make a much better experience for a transferee that ultimately results in happier transferees and lower costs.
Hey, Ben, quick question. Are organizations who use PricePoint, are they able to essentially pick and choose the folks who they want to move, or the multiple players in the moving process right through PricePoint, or do they just sort of,
Yeah, so what I found was that, moving is a relationship industry, much like all of mobility. It's built on relationships. So our clients had movers that they wanted to work with, and we are mover agnostic. We will work with anyone, but ultimately we see ourselves sort of as the conduit between partners. And so there's no open environment where you see access to all the movers, and that wouldn't be good, because ultimately, if you're only receiving 1 move a year from someone, you can't build a process around that. You can't staff an account manager or proactively solve problems and understand a client's policies. So we think that it's much better to have an environment where you're working with 2, 3 international movers. If you have a huge program, maybe 4 or 5, where you have a really great relationship with the movers and they're looking out for you ahead of time. And you create a closed marketplace with your preferred movers and let their efficiencies drive where you're distributing the moves to.
Interesting. Yeah, Lynn, do you want to jump in and share a little bit about kind of how you're viewing, how you viewed the transfer experience from where Pivot stands?
Yeah, so Pivot kind of, backed into this in the sense that we actually started as a consumer app for people moving and traveling to help acclimate in their new city. And we were live on the App Store and Google Play in New York and London when we started getting approached by corporations. And, they said, came across your platform, we like what you're building. It's actually something we're struggling with our relocated employees and business travelers. So I say that because we've been really kind of consumer and human centric since day one. We're the whole point of Pivot is to be a vehicle to connect relocated and mobile employees and their family members around the world, regardless of the corporation, regardless of RMCs, to get trusted advice and make plans to meet socially with people that are in the same situation as them and know what they're going through, but also people that have things in common, same language, New York Knicks fan, vegans. So it's really, for us, it's about technology to connect the dots. So we're seeing that especially through COVID. And I think one of the problems was that employee well-being was kind of considered as a soft benefit. One of the silver linings of COVID was really that it brought to the attention, how much ROI is really attached to it. And the problem that, at least in the US, 1 in 5 Americans are relocating on their own due to COVID. And so, how do you curb social isolation? How do you connect the dots? And how do you make it so that your employees feel supported? So, one of the things that we're doing is we're working with a social network scientist and a couple of academics at Harvard Business School that study the future of work. And what we're working with them on is, again, to really the human side of things onto a technology platform so that we can discover with their past studies, okay, if the employees do X, Y, and Z on Pivot, whether that be meeting up with other relocated employees, reaching out to, another relocated employee that knows what they're going through, then we can predict that they'll be 15% more successful in their post.
And Lynn, I just as a sort of a quick dive in, how are you able to help these individuals sort of connect socially, given that we are social distancing? Because it's now more important than ever, but at the same time, it's more challenging than ever. You can't just say everyone show up at this bar and it's an event for all the expats. You can't do that. So how are you kind of, very briefly, kind of tackling that or thinking about that from Pivot's standpoint?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we ran a survey at the beginning of this, and we're just really concerned and staggered by what we found in terms of, over 60% of people, expats before COVID hit, didn't have a social network to rely on, and, weren't familiar with the healthcare system in their country. And so really what Pivot's trying to do is in the palm of your hands before you move, when you move and after you move, to give you a social network of people that are in the same situation with you as you in your new city, so that you can, go on to Pivot and ask for advice, ask, what other people, how people are going through this, and also make plans, to meet virtually in this environment, which I think is the most important thing, is really just feeling supported and feeling like you're not alone. So the other thing that we've been working on, we recently brought Randy Zuckerberg, the former CMO of Facebook and the creator of Facebook Live, onto our advisory board. And she's really helping us with the components of that, as Facebook's really been adopting that as well.
It's very cool. Thank you. Super interesting. And it's cool to see how you all, and I guess all of us are thinking about this. Since this panel is really about tech disruptors, right? And, the folks out there who are listening are sort of in-house mobility, immigration, HR, the folks inside of organizations typically are somehow partnering with organizations to move successfully employees around the country and around the world. I think what was exciting to me about this panel was the fact that we're all, I think, self-proclaimed startups. Some of us have been around for longer than others, but, we're all still very small and nimble. And one of the things that I wanted to sort of touch on is how you all perceive organizations working with startups is beneficial to those organizations. I know this might come off as like, hey, hire us, right? But it's a little bit broader than that. It's like, I found that sometimes we're talking to larger organizations. It's not that they don't like the product. It's just that it's hard for them to sell the idea of working with a small org, right? Everyone works with Oracle and with AP and just assume that those organizations can give them every single solution they need. But indeed, I think this is where startups really shine bright, right? They can show what we can do, why working with a startup is really powerful, and how. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
So I have a thought in that I feel like the role of a startup is to take an idea and see if you can achieve product market fit. And that's really easier to do in an environment that has no rules or regulations. You just go and adapt very, very quickly until you find product market fit, and then you scale, and then you get out of that true startup space. And what I think is kind of interesting is that I think that our industry is at an inflection point right now. We have never seen such change in the talent mobility space. I mean, we've been talking a lot today about virtual assignments and managing a distributed workforce, and how the role of the global mobility professional is actually now influencing the general HR organization and driving compliance around all these new challenges. So the goalpost is changing, and I feel like it's actually a very ripe environment for startups to be successful and drive partnerships with organizations to solve new challenging problems.
Yeah, I would add that, I think I think about it from two perspectives. One is the actual technology piece, and then one is the support piece. and both of which I think are critical. All of mobility requires some level of service and support to make it successful. These are too nuanced and the stakes are too high for these to be sort of entirely, in many cases, entirely technology-driven plays. On the technology side, I think Lynn's point about Pivot being sort of consumer first, and the DNA, your DNA started as you started as a consumer app, and I think that's true in a lot of cases. There's in our space, there's plenty of immigration technology platforms out there, but very few were started in the era of collaborative software, cloud-based software, where we're really thinking first and foremost about the HR professional and the international employee. Most of these solutions were built for providers. So in our space, there's plenty of immigration case management solutions that were built 20 years ago, but they were built for attorneys and paralegals. And so that experience naturally working with a startup that built its platform during today's era with a different sort of foundational stance on how to serve companies first and foremost, I think that's an opportunity there. On the support side, I think ultimately it's about startups being customer centric, right? And really the opportunity to be flexible and nimble, but also provide a superior experience from actually supporting your clients, being responsive. I think that hunger that startups has translates to the support and service piece as well. So we found, when we talk to our customers and they're doing reference calls for others, that they're actually talking about the support more than the technology in most cases. They're saying what I love about working with Bridge is the support. Oh, and by the way, the technology is great too, not the other way around. And that I think that's interesting. I think that there is the sort of the old adage of everyone, no one gets fired for choosing IBM, but I think that's starting to change as enterprises think about what is truly the best solution for me.
The one thing that we find too is that when our clients are sort of searching around and trying to find a solution, when they stumble on startups are less focused on here's a list of our features, we check all these features and whatever, and that they find that when they have an opportunity to talk with us and say well, this is our current process, startups seem to fit just better in terms of integrating with their existing process. And certainly I speak for myself here, but I know in general startups are much more willing to change, add features as needed, and sort of adapt to make sure that everyone's on the same page.
I would agree. I think the biggest thing is what everyone has said before, with just the lack of red tape that startups have, and the ability to really move forward with things quickly. And I think one of the most exciting things about working with large corporations from the startup side is that you have the experience, the user base to really understand the ecosystem, and what the startups have are the vehicles to really work with you to shape the product. So it's a really interesting and collaborative kind of relationship that I think works really well, and I wish more companies would embrace it. The other thing I think is really important to know about startups as well, at least, we're really seeing this on the social component as we're looking, we've been spending a lot of time looking through the entire employee relocation journey, from the moment they find out about the move to, the end of their post. And what we're finding is that, there's a lot of salespeople in the process. And there's a lot of, the relocation companies and the HR departments do a flawless job of moving people from A to B and moving their things from A to B. But the human side of things is just not accounted for. And that really results in the churn rate. So, you almost need a third party to come in that perspective, because no one's taking, full responsibility for it, to help. And to connect all the RMCs and all of the corporations and provide some sort of network that I just think would be way too hard for individual corporations or RMCs to do on their own.
I love that, and one of the ways I want to chime in there is to say that when I start working with, or even before I start working with a relatively large client, one thing, kind of Lynn and Ramesh, to both your points, sometimes they'll ask me, hey, do you have this feature? And I used to get really nervous when the answer was no, and I would try to figure out ways of saying, well, no, but we have this and that. But now I'm much more confident in saying, look, we that's definitely on our radar, but we haven't built it yet. That being said, if we work together, we will essentially definitely build it in your vision, right? You'll never really get that from a much larger corporation unless you have a huge account, whatever it might be. And I found that a lot of prospective turned real clients are actually quite excited about that and can sort of partner with us on building it out. And I think that is how companies grow. Like IBM, Microsoft, they were small companies that only did one thing really well. It was just a long time ago, right? And so now they've sort of piled on and do more and more and more and more. And then at some point we come in, we say, hey, some of these things are a bit outdated. We have a really interesting question here from Eva Martins that sort of links into what we're talking about here. And the question is, are you seeing an increase in collaboration between tech providers within the global mobility and immigration space? And if I can just add one comment to that, I've heard that question many times before. I'm curious to hear what you all think quickly, but it feels like the answer is, or the sort of the hesitation often is, well, we don't want to have 10 apps that we're working with, right? We want to have, that's why it's easier to go with Oracle because stuff's, I don't mean to pick on Oracle. They're just top of mind, but like a big corporation, stuff is like good. It does what we wish it could be better, but we just sign in the one time. So I've seen in the immigration space a lot more API integrations between tools and between platforms. What are you all kind of seeing, if you want to touch on that briefly?
Sorry, just jump in. So we definitely I've seen a lot more discussion surrounding APIs, integrations, and my background is a software developer, so that really excites me. We need to see more, though. We definitely need to see more, and hopefully in the next 5-10 years, we'll see more from the government side of things, more integrations and more insight into sort of what's going on. So we're not there yet, but it is a good time to have those sorts of discussions. We're platform as a translation provider. We're sort of platform agnostic. We don't care who you use. You get a PDF at the end of the day, but we want to facilitate access and integration that is easier, more secure. When you're dealing with sensitive PII, obviously, the less that's being downloaded onto somebody's hard drive and then uploaded somewhere else, the better. Nobody wants to have that sort of risk. So APIs act as a great way to facilitate secure transfers, among other things. But I would personally like to see that more, but it's definitely something that is now on people's radar.
Yeah, I'm seeing a tremendous amount of growth in this space. I think that COVID really accelerated our change. We've changed 10 years in 6 months. And one of my favorite graphs that I saw was the amount of online retail as compared to total retail. It was like 13, 14, 15, 16, 17%. Every year it would go up by 1%, and then it went to 28% in 3 months. We are going to start using more and more platforms, and there's been a lot of growth in the mobility platforms, a lot of new entrants in that space, and I think it goes along with what everyone in the audience wants. You want all your data to be actionable, insightful, and enable you to make more strategic decisions. And so now that the corporations and global mobility professionals are asking for it, well, now it's trickling down, and that is causing people to actually grow and integrate there. I think a lot of it has been based on timing. There's been mobility platforms for years that have been there and haven't really done all that much, in my opinion. And it's been because there's been no integration with all the partners. So it was this standalone, isolated thing. Now, I feel like the supply chain in every single vertical within mobility is being streamlined and able to be integrated into the overall platforms. And that's honestly what our business model is. I never expect a corporation or even a relocation management company a few years from now to ever actually go into price point. I fully expect that people will API the data out of our systems into their experiences to really streamline the process and make better experiences for everyone. So I think it's a really exciting time for that right now, and I'm seeing a tremendous amount of investment in it.
If I could just in case, and Lynn, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. For folks in the audience, in case you haven't heard of APIs, et cetera, at its simplest, and please, the tech professionals in the room, it's essentially the like building pipes between different platforms and exchanging information seamlessly. So if I log into Image Translate and I can pull in data from Bridge and populate whatever required information I need. The idea is I don't have to sort of log into everyone automatically or individually. So sorry, just wanted to give that little note just in case.
No, I think it's so important. The other thing that we were seeing, so I think what's really important in tech to always think about is, coming up with that minimal viable product and only building what the customers want and really keeping that in mind. And so I say that because in the short term, at least some of the things that we're seeing is even if the technology is on their own, maybe you could do things like white label it, right? So that it, keeps the same branding as the corporation. And then once you get, an API where it really makes sense, then you integrate it. But, that's kind of something that we're trying to do and we're trying to prioritize, because I think what's so exciting about technology, again, just from this, creating the mobility space to be more human centric, is that you can add all these really cool features that people just can't do on the ground, whether that be AI, whether that be with the data, or a heat map which tells you where there's crime so that where not to live and where not to travel. So I think the sky is the limit. And I think that, startups, certainly in this space, have been super collaborative, and I'm really excited to see where, this all fizzles out.
So I want to, we have just about 6 more minutes and we have questions coming in. They're great. I want to jump in here. And Ramesh, I know you didn't have a chance to answer that question, so I'd love to hear you jump in onto this one. Really important one here. Well, first of all, from Guy Smith of DLA Piper saying, really refreshing to hear from innovators rather than the usual market players. So thank you all. This is sort of the idea. It's not to say anyone's better or worse, but we try to come here and offer new, fresh perspectives on sort of how this process can happen via, or at least not via, but supplemented by technology that's being built more purposefully. The question here from Mike Hibbard of Global Expat Pay: any tips to help global mobility work through the large corporate procurement process, which is generally not startup friendly? If I could give just a 10-second thought here, procurement has been the most fascinating learning experience, I think, to date of starting my company, right? Because when you start something, you build it, you're like, great, it makes all the sense in the world. As soon as I show it to somebody, and the buyers, whether it's a partner or the CEO, gives me the thumbs up, it's just a matter of paperwork. It's not. And procurement is, it's their job to kind of make sure that everything goes a certain way. And I found that sometimes they just don't know they don't know where to fit it in. We don't know where to fit startups into the procurement process. So curious to hear, Ramesh, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and first, and then everyone else as well. Any tips on, helping procurement from large corporates kind of really work with the startups more?
Yeah, I think, as we've been through those processes, I think it's a matter of both positioning and preparation. So on the positioning side, I think in some ways we need to start to retire the word startup or think of other ways of framing that, right? We are a nimble company and an innovative company, but we consider ourselves established and mature. And so, we try to position ourselves a little bit differently in that way. And we rely on the customers we serve to, be those references and be our biggest champions. And so I think that's an important part of that positioning. Is I think there's a lot of stigma that comes with, what does a startup mean? Does that mean they're still figuring things out? No. And so that's a starting point for that, sort of arming procurement with that social proof. that these guys know exactly what they're doing. And here's the market validation of that. On the preparation side, yeah, I would just sort of echo that. Like, I think there's things that we've seen companies do in terms of arming their procurement teams with data on the company, data on things like security, right? Try to do that up front. We're seeing lots of like security questionnaires, and we've created a lot of documentation that allows us to arm and educate the procurement team before they launch into sort of their usual sets of questions. A lot of our models are unique, right? So in our world, we're a combination of a technology platform and a legal service provider, and that procurement teams aren't used to. They're trying to bucket us. They're saying, okay, are you a SaaS like license play? So I'm going to give you this questionnaire that's like a bunch of software questions, or are you a legal service provider? So we're going to provide you a completely separate sort of track through our procurement process. And so educating them up front of this is the way this model works, and helping them understand how to bucket us, I think really helps with ensuring that you're not hitting a bunch of hiccups in that procurement process.
Yeah, thank you. We have 2 minutes here, so if anyone wants to jump in for any other quick sort of thoughts there about tips to help with that, with procurement.
So I worked in procurement for 15 years, and I echo what Romesh just said. The RFP process is designed to really simplify and create an auditable process to judge, but at the same time, it's really commoditizing things. So I think what Romesh, you just said is like, you need to educate them and get up front and help them understand sort of why you exist, how you work, what you are, because you're not what they went out to RFP for, and you're not going to fit very well into that RFP. And I think it's up to the procurement individual, like part of their job is to really dive deep and learn a lot about our industry. And I've seen a lot of procurement professionals do a terrible disservice to the mobility industry and the mobility professionals on this call, just in focusing on price, because that's how they're measured. And I think it's a matter of education and investing the time in them to understand where the real differentiations between companies are. And I think that's the best way to position you for success.
And last, one thing I'll just say, because I know we have to end up here in a second, for those of you in the audience, thank you so much for being with us. I know Alex is going to come in and say a word, but please reach out to any and all of us on LinkedIn, on email. We love to hear these questions. We want to talk about this stuff because it's exciting to us, and we know it's maybe exciting, interesting, and or intriguing to you. So please reach out. It doesn't have to be about working together. It could just be, what do you think is happening? What do you think about this? We love talking about this stuff. So wanted to end on that.
Great.
Fantastic. Thank you, Roman, and thank you, Ian, Ramesh, Lynn, Ben. That was really fascinating, and it's so great to hear some real innovators within the industry. And like you said, Roman, yes, there's some established players and they're fantastic. But I feel that these companies, your companies, can really complement some of those organisations. So it's great to hear, and we hope to see a continue and an increase in collaboration between organisations. So thank you for taking the time out to share that with us. And we're hopefully we'll see you next year at the face-to-face event. We'll get you there, and we can do this again with a human beings in the audience. So thanks, guys, very much, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.